Hello, good day everybody. Welcome to iTTV. For today's lesson, let's look at translocation and transpiration in plants. Now, so basically we're focusing on the transportation system in plants with regards to translocation and transpiration, the two T's. Now, translocation involves the transportation of organic substances via phloem tissue from leaves to other parts of a plant. It happens in two directions, that is both upwards and downwards in the plant. So if you were to refer to the diagram, you notice that the xylem and the phloem vascular tissue are located side by side. And always accompanying the phloem will be the companion cells, which are full with organelles like mitochondria, nucleus and dense cytoplasm. And beside the companion cell will be the leaf cell. As the sucrose is being synthesized in the leaf cell, it will actually diffuse into the companion cells, and the sucrose would also help to facilitate the movement of sucrose into the phloem, and from the phloem, the sucrose is transported to other parts of the plant, such as to the root cell. So as it moves downwards, the sucrose diffuses from high to low concentration into the companion cell, and just like following the diffusion gradient, sucrose diffuses into the root cell. Water flows upwards, defying gravity from the root cells straight upwards, and you can notice that water also diffuses into the phloem sieve tube cells. So as you can see, the translocation process is two-way. Now moving on. Transportation of sugar and amino acids are for growing regions, for growth and development, for cells for metabolism, and organs such as roots for storage. So if you refer to the diagram again, some of the organic substances will be stored in the roots for storage purposes, and of course it will also be used for cells like companion cells for metabolism, because companion cells are rich in mitochondria, so they constantly need to use energy in the form of ATP. Now for transpiration, on the other hand, because we've just finished on translocation, transpiration is defined as the loss of water vapor from plants to the atmosphere. There are three main sites of transpiration. A will be the stomata, where most of the water is lost. B, the cuticle, where water loss varies with the thickness of cuticle. And C, lenticels, where water loss is in a small amount. So generally there are three ways that water is lost, either through stomata, cuticles, or lenticels. And the diagram shows you that water absorbed by the roots travels through the plant via the xylem vessels and tracheids, and water will evaporate from the leaf surface either through cuticles, lenticels, or through the stomata. Now, what are the importances of transpiration? Now, it's important for students to focus on this because it's quite a popular exam question. Transpiration pulls water and dissolved mineral salts from roots to leaves, known as transpirational pool. Water is used for photosynthesis and turgidity of cells that provide support to leaves and young stems. Mineral salts are used for activities in the cell. So transpiration is so important because water is used for photosynthesis to maintain cell turgidity and to provide support for the leaves and young stems. Besides that, evaporation of water helps in cooling down the plant as the process requires latent heat. So those are the importances of transpiration for the plant. Now let us focus on something else. Let's look at the pathway of water from the soil to the leaves. Now let's look at the flow chart. Firstly, water and mineral ions are absorbed by younger roots, and root hairs actually increase the surface area for absorption. Cell sap in root hairs is more concentrated than the surrounding soil solution, and of course this permits entry of water by osmosis into roots that dilute cell sap. And water molecules then diffuse into adjacent cells which are more concentrated, and followed by diffusion of water molecules from one cell to another across the root by osmosis. On the other hand, mineral ions are pumped actively from root cells into xylem vessels, causing vessels in the root to be highly concentrated. And this causes water to enter xylem from root cells by osmosis, creating root pressure that pushes water up the xylem to a certain height in the plants. Besides root pressure, capillary action and transpirational pool are also involved in this process. Capillary action refers to cohesion and adhesion of water molecules, while evaporation of water from mesophyll cells into intercellular airspace of the leaves happens through the open stomata during the day. Loss of water from the mesophyll cell is then replaced by water flowing from the top part of the xylem vessels in the leaves. This creates a force that moves the continuous water column upwards through xylem vessels from roots to the leaves, known as the transpirational pool. So as you can see, the transpirational pool is a remarkable process starting from the roots. And the young roots are the ones which will start to absorb water. And of course, water enters from soil solution into the root cells through osmosis. And osmosis is the process of transportation of water from regions of high to regions of low concentration of water. Water molecules will diffuse into adjacent cells, and water will diffuse from one cell to another across the root. And on the other hand, mineral ions will be pumped because this is active transport from low to high concentration. Mineral ions will be pumped from root cells into xylem, causing the xylem vessels to be highly concentrated. And that's why water will also further move in from root cells to xylem through osmosis. And therefore, you have capillary action and transpirational pool. So that is actually how water moves from soil all the way to the leaves. Okay, and you can notice that there's evaporation of water from the top part of the xylem vessels through the leaves. Now let's look at something else known as catation. On nights which are hot and humid, stomata are closed and no transpiration happens. Excess water which are absorbed from the soil needs to be removed. So how is the water going to be removed? The water will be removed through special glands called hydatodes positioned at the edge of the leaf. Water is forced out of the hydatodes by root pressure. So if you refer to the diagram, it's a very nice picture whereby water molecules are forced out of the hydatodes by root pressure because excess water has to be lost in some way. Now, let us look at something else known as the opening and the closing of stomata. Now, stomata are located on lower surface on dicotyledonous leaves, whereas on both upper and lower surfaces on monocotyledonous leaves. And if you look at the diagram, there are pictures of stomata, surface view of a stoma which is open. Stoma consists of a pair of guard cells surrounding the stomata pore, and the guard cell has thin elastic outer wall, thick, less elastic inner wall. They have nucleus, cytoplasm, and chloroplast. So let's see how the stomata opens during the day. What are the sequence of events? So we know that glucose produced during photosynthesis increases osmotic pressure in the guard cells. Okay, because the guard cells would also produce glucose during the day because there's a lot of chloroplasts, so it will increase osmotic pressure. Potassium ions are actively transported from epidermal cells into guard cells, and this further increases osmotic pressure in the guard cells as concentration of potassium ion increases. Water enters by osmosis from surrounding epidermal cells into guard cells, and the guard cells become turgid and curve outward, causing stomata to open. So basically, that is what happens and how the stomata pore opens during the day. Whereas during the night, there's no photosynthesis, no sunlight, no photosynthesis. So glucose concentration decreases in the guard cell. Furthermore, potassium ions move out from the guard cells into epidermal cells. This decreases osmotic pressure in the guard cells. Water diffuses out from guard cells into epidermal cells. Guard cells become flaccid, causing stomata to close. So let me show you pictorially on board what happens, during the day and during the night, how actually the stomata cells can open or close. Okay, let's say this happens during the day. So generally, why would the stomata cells actually open? Yeah, I know, they look like kidneys. Now they have a thick inner elastic wall. This is quite thick. Okay, thick inner elastic wall. This side also, thick inner elastic wall. Okay, this further looks like kidney beans. And they have a thin outer wall. So what happens is that these will be the guard cells, and surrounding it will be the epidermal cells. So this will be the epidermal cells. So in the guard cells, they are rich of chloroplasts and nucleus. So during the day, there is sunlight. So of course, photosynthesis can happen in the guard cells. And generally, there will be a lot of sucrose being formed. So what happens would be that generally the sucrose would actually accumulate here. So sucrose concentration, this is my short form, sucrose concentration increases because there is photosynthesis that happens. Okay, photosynthesis happens during the day. Now what happens also is that K plus ions are being pumped into the guard cells from the epidermal cells surrounding the guard cell. So K plus through active transport are being pumped into the guard cells. So what happens will be that it increases the osmotic pressure in the guard cells, and as a result of that, water would actually move in. Perhaps I'll use blue color to show water. So water molecules in the epidermal cells will move in as well. Okay, water molecules in the epidermal cells will also move in to the guard cells. So because it's full with water, so then it becomes very turgid, and when it's turgid, the stomata pore opens. Okay, so as a result of the diffusion of water into the guard cells, the stomata pore opens. Stomata pore opens due to the turgidity of the guard cells. Now, what happens during the night time? So let's have a look. Okay, during the night, of course, during the night, no sunlight, only the moon, right? So there is no photosynthesis, no sucrose. So let me draw again. Okay, so this time the guard cells, they actually become flaccid. Okay, so the guard cells look a bit different. They still have the thick inner elastic wall, but it's closed. Okay, and then of course surrounding it will be the epidermal cells. Okay, these are still epidermal cells, all right? Epidermal cells here and here. So what happens here, as you can see, would be there is no photosynthesis, so no sucrose formed in the guard cells, and the K plus ions will move out. K plus ions will be actively pumped out. Through active transport, K plus moves out, opposite from this, okay? And as a result of that, it decreases the osmotic pressure in the guard cells. And what happens to the water molecules? Well, water molecules originally here, they will move out, okay? So water molecules originally here will start to move out because it's night. From day, it's turned to night. So water molecules move out. And water molecules move out, so the guard cells become flaccid. Flaccid. Like no energy. And as a result of that, you would notice that the stomata pore closes. So the stomata pore closes as a result. Okay, so I'll just show you clearly. Okay, stomata pore closes. Over here, as you notice, right, the guard cells, in contrast, are turgid. That's really different. Guard cells are turgid, guard cells become flaccid. So that's the contrast between how the stomata pore opens and closes during day and night with regards of the presence of water. Whether water moves in, guard cells become turgid, stomata pore opens. But here water moves out, guard cells become flaccid, stomata pore closes. So it is the events of the day during the day and the night. Now, so anyway, let's move on to something else, okay? Let's look at factors affecting the rate of transpiration. Now, there are environmental factors affecting rate of transpiration, and they would be air movement, light intensity, temperature, and relative humidity. So let's look at each factor in detail. Now, air movement, the first factor that affects the rate of transpiration. The movement of air carries away water that have diffused from leaves and stimulates diffusion of more water molecules to the surrounding. If there is more air movement, the greater the rate of transpiration. Whereas, if there is little air movement, accumulation of water vapor happens around the stomata, causing a decrease in the rate of transpiration. So if we refer to the graph, ladies and gentlemen, that as there is more air movement, the transpiration rate increases up to a certain point. That even if there is so much air movement, transpiration rate will be constant, because movement of air will just carry away the water that have diffused from the leaves. Now let's look at the second factor that affects transpiration rate, that would be temperature. A rise in temperature increases the kinetic energy of water molecules that causes them to move faster through the stomata. High temperature also lowers the relative humidity of the air and increases the rate of transpiration. Whereas, during low temperature, relative humidity of the air is increased, causing a decrease in the rate of transpiration. So if you refer to the graph, as the temperature increases, the transpiration rate increases, but not proportionately, and up to a certain temperature, transpiration rate becomes constant, as you can observe from the graph that plateaus at a certain temperature. Of course, we all know that increase in temperature will increase the kinetic energy of the water molecules. They will vibrate more, and therefore they will be able to move faster through the stomata. Third factor light intensity. During the day, when light intensity is high, the rate of water evaporation from the plant increases. So heat by sunlight will cause the stomata to open and increases loss of water from the plant. And whereas in the dark, stomata close, causing the loss of water to be reduced. So even if you look at the graph, right, that when light intensity is the highest, which is roughly like about 11:30 or something, the transpiration rate also will follow the bell-shaped curve of the light intensity. That when light intensity is maximum, transpiration would follow suit to be maximum as well. So this further confirms that the higher the light intensity, the higher the rate of transpiration because of the opening and closure of stomata. Let's look at the last factor that affects the rate of transpiration, which would be relative humidity. The rate of evaporation depends on the difference in concentration of water molecules in the substomatal spaces and in the surrounding atmosphere. So if low relative humidity in the surrounding atmosphere, water vapor will escape faster from the stomata. But if there is high relative humidity, the air is saturated with water vapor, causing reduction in water loss from the plants. So as you can see from the graph that if the relative humidity of surrounding air is higher, the transpiration rate would be also low. It is an inverse relationship. When humidity is high, transpiration rate is low. So that's why the graph is an inverse proportion graph. High humidity, reduction in water loss. Now let's look at some questions for today. Which of this is not true about the opening of stomata? A. Glucose produced during photosynthesis increases osmotic pressure in the gut cells. Option B. Potassium ions are actively transported from epidermal cells into gut cells. Option C. Osmotic pressure in the gut cells increases as concentration of potassium ions decrease, and water enters by osmosis from gut cells into surrounding epidermal cells. Okay, let's run through the options. A. Glucose produced during photosynthesis increases osmotic pressure in gut cells. That's true for sure. Alright, that glucose increased concentration, as even if I drew in the board glucose or sucrose, now it would actually increase in concentration. Now B. Potassium ions are actively transported from epidermal cells into gut cells. Now this is definitely true because K+ is transported from epidermal cells into gut cells. C. Osmotic pressure in the gut cells increases as concentration of potassium ions decrease. When there's a higher concentration of K+, this would obviously increase the osmotic pressure of the gut cells. I'm sure you would have noticed that it's definitely true. Now D. So water enters by osmosis. It's actually from epidermal cells into gut cells. Because if you refer to, let me help you understand from the board, okay? That basically water enters from epidermal cells into the gut cells and not gut cells to epidermal cells. So that's why option D is incorrect, because option D says water goes from gut cells to epidermal cells. Now that only happens during the night, because during the night, it's true, water diffuses from gut cells to epidermal cells. But the question was, what happens during the day? So therefore, what is happening, alright, about the opening of stomata will be water goes in from epidermal cells into gut cells. Okay, let's look at another question. Which of these events happen during closing of stomata? A. Water diffuses out by active transport from gut cells. B. Potassium ions move into gut cells. C. Decrease in osmotic pressure in the gut cells. And D. Glucose concentration increases in the gut cell. Now, look carefully at the options and don't be tricked by the tricky answers. Now, what is your answer? If we look at the first option, what happens during closure of the stomata at night? The first option was water diffuses out. Is it true that water diffuses out? That's true. But they try to trick the student by saying diffuses by active transport. Now, water diffuses out certainly through a process called osmosis. Okay, so water diffuses out through osmosis and not through active transport at all. So the term is wrong when they say through active transport. If they say water diffuses out from the guard cells, then it's right. But because they added in that water diffuses out from the guard cells by active transport, that's surely incorrect. So A is out. Now B, potassium ions move into guard cells. Obviously, potassium ions move out through active transport. So option B is wrong. Option C, there is decrease in osmotic pressure in the guard cells. Now what happens is that because glucose is not produced at night, no photosynthesis at night, so the glucose concentration is very low. When glucose concentration is low, there will be a decrease in osmotic pressure. So option C is right, that there will be a decrease in osmotic pressure. Okay, because there's no photosynthesis, so there will be a decrease in osmotic pressure in the guard cells. And that is why water moves out by osmosis. And obviously option D is wrong because it says that glucose concentration increases, when we know that at night there is no photosynthesis and thereby no glucose in the guard cells. So let's move on to other questions. Which of these best describes translocation? A. Excess water absorbed from the soil is removed by some plants. Loss of water vapor from plants to atmosphere. Continuous water column up the xylem vessel. And the transportation of organic substances via phloem to parts of plant. Now this is a bit of memory work. I'm sure you can get the answer. Yes, you're right. This is just purely based on your recall of the knowledge learned just now. That translocation best is described when you say it's the transportation of organic substances via phloem to parts of a plant, thereby the answer is D. Loss of water vapor from the plant's atmosphere is known as transpiration. Okay, so the answer is D. Now let's look at an essay question. Now this one I hope that you will really study through because this is an immensely popular exam question. Well, describe the pathway of water from soil to the leaves. Now you have to make sure that you answer every part, every step and don't leave out any step. So just roughly just go through your mind, what are the keywords or sentences that you would construct in the exam. Okay, certain key sentences that have to be there would be: water and mineral ions absorbed by younger roots that have thinner outer layers. Presence of root hairs increases surface area for adsorption. Cell sap in root hairs is more concentrated than the surrounding soil solution as it contains sugars, amino acids and salts. This permits entry of water by osmosis into roots that dilutes cell sap. Water molecules then diffuse into adjacent cells which are more concentrated. This is then followed by diffusion of water molecules from one cell to another across the root by osmosis. On the other hand, mineral ions are pumped actively from root cells into xylem vessel, causing the xylem vessels in the root to be highly concentrated. This causes water to enter xylem from root cells by osmosis, creating a root pressure that pushes water up the xylem to a certain height in the plants. Besides root pressure, capillary action and transpiration of wool are also involved. What is capillary action? Students should write that it refers to cohesion and adhesion of water molecules. Evaporation of water from mesophyll cells into intercellular air spaces of the leaves happens through the open stomata during the day. Loss of water from mesophyll cell is then replaced by water flowing from the top part of xylem vessels in the leaves. This creates a force that moves the continuous water column upward through the xylem vessels from roots to the leaves, known as transpirational pool. And continuous flow of water through the plants is known as transpiration stream. So all these points have to be there. Please do not miss out every part and do study smart for the exams. And that ends our lesson for today. Okay, thank you so much for watching iTTV, boys and girls. We look forward to see you again the next time. Thank you and have a great week ahead.